First of all, does this immediately mean that funding dries up in Silicon Valley? Does it accelerate it for companies with kind of new technology in the new markets? What are you seeing play out here?
I think venture capitalists, like everyone, is trying to sort out what does a new normal look like. The good news for venture capital funds is many of us raise money from folks who have long-term pools of capital, foundations, endowments, et cetera. Obviously, the volatility in their own portfolios impacts their interest in venture. So I think if you've already got a fund that's raised, you're probably in good shape. But as you can imagine, the people who are making these asset allocation decisions are trying to read the market just like we are. And in terms of companies, I think right now, if you have a company that's levered to distributed or remote work, telemedicine, things like that, those are categories that are very popular with investors right now.
Are you seeing a raft of new companies trying to fundraise off the back of that?
Absolutely. And I'd put them into two broad buckets. One bucket is companies that previously had, bricks and mortar or offline businesses that are trying to rapidly adjust to this new world. And others are people who've been working on distributed or remote technology for some time period. And it feels like now's the moment for them.
Yeah, and like you said, they're probably sitting there thinking, okay, well, we can at least kind of prove our case. I'm curious if there's going to be a longer term kind of bad effect, a lingering bad effect on the kinds of companies that would have gotten funding maybe 5 years ago, but won't get it in this environment today. Maybe they just have weaker business models. They're not as profitable. They don't have that path to profitability. Do you think that's the case?
I do think that in general, the sentiment in venture has switched a bit from maybe a model of growth at all costs and go, go, go to one that's more about making sure that the unit economics and the fundamentals of the business make sense. So I do think if you were a business that needed tons and tons, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital to prove out your business model, those businesses feel tougher to finance today. So you might get fewer of those, and maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. We've been burned a little bit in the transition from private to public markets for some of these business models. Charles, while I have you, I want to ask you as well about diversity in your field, which is pretty poor. How would you describe people's awareness about it, your efforts to kind of fundraise as a minority-led firm yourself?
I would say Black and brown venture capitalists have felt that the industry has a terrible record on diversity for a long time. And a lot of times it felt like shouting into a well. And I think one of the things that's happened as a result of all of the protests around George Floyd is a reexamination of, who gets what. And I think venture capital has a long way to go as a business to being both more inclusive for fund managers like myself, but also downstream for entrepreneurs of color and women who've gotten substantially less capital than I think they deserve.
Do you think your firm has been maybe starved is too extreme, but starved of capital to some extent, or lost out to others because you just, you didn't kind of come up on people's radar?
I think in many ways, I feel kind of the opposite. I think I had what should have been every advantage for a venture capitalist. I have 2 degrees from Stanford. I've been a partner at a previous fund for 5 years. Those are the things that ought to make your fundraise easy. If you look at the numbers of our industry, spin out manager from an established platform. And it was significantly more difficult than I had expected. And I'll never know what was in people's hearts. There's parts about our business model that I know investors find challenging, but it's the hard part as a manager. You never know whether you're getting no's because people don't like your business model or whether there's something else.